In Egypt, where the annual rainfall in the desert areas is less than 30 millimeters a year and around 80 millimeters for other parts of the country, water is liquid gold. Yet in the Sahara Desert, rich deposits of underground water give rise to oases on the surface, which support small communities. The Nile Delta has suffered subsidence from groundwater pumping, but the hard limestone underneath the desert stops the same phenomenon happening to oases. Yet the water may run out someday. Strict regulations have been put in place to stop over-excavation of underground reserves. In the latest of our series of features from Egypt, we go to the Bahariya Oasis for a glimpse of life among the Saharan sand dunes.
You may be inclined to think that this is a villa on a dreamy tropical island. This is actually the Bahariya Oasis in Egypt, situated some 360 kilometers southwest of Cairo. Local resident Mohamed invites the diary reporters to his home. His wife serves a plate of the local specialty, Egyptian date, for the guests from Taiwan. The dry climate of the country seals the sugary sweetness in the plum dates that were washed with groundwater, which is used to irrigate the date palms too.
There are 7 underground lakes, so we have an abundant water supply here to use. Further down, around 1,200 meters below, there are hot springs too, but they are not as hot as the ones at 1,500 meters underneath, which are around 40 degrees Celsius.
Desert dweller Mohamed says to survive in the sand dunes, even in the comfort of an oasis, every household must have a reservoir.
Water saving is very important here. All the groundwater is pumped to and stored in the tanks, which are only open when needed, such as for irrigation. We don't waste any drop.
With scarce rain and a high rate of evaporation, the desert's only reliable source of fresh water comes from underground, yielding around 530,000 cubic meters per year. In addition, as inhabitants along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea also rely on groundwater, the usage of which makes up 1% of the country's total water consumption, one wonders if pumping water from underground reservoirs inevitably causes subsidence.
Yes, there is no sinking in the oasis because the oasis mainly formed by a theory that it composed mainly of limestone. Limestone is a hard rock. As I mentioned before, in the delta, it's a soft rocks like shale and mudstone, which with water become saturated and become sinking with structure.
The Nile Delta is sinking because of its structural property. Constituting mostly of clay, when groundwater is pumped out, the reduced water pressure means a loss of support for the beds of clay and hence the collapse of the ground. However, underneath an oasis are layers of limestone, which are hard enough to stand firm even when groundwater is lost.
Mostly the big or the huge aquifers belonging to an age, to a period, or geologic period since millions and millions of years ago. It's about 300 million years ago in an age called Paleozoic.
Formed millions of years ago, fresh groundwater may run out one day due to prolonged droughts. To forestall the possible water crisis, the Egyptian government has been regulating the use of groundwater.
Every household is free to excavate wells that are less than 400 meters deep. As for hot springs, which are found 1,200 meters beneath the ground, only the government has the right to access them.
In addition to restricting the depth of water excavation, the government also controls the number of new wells. The distance between wells must also be greater than 1 kilometer. By controlling access to the precious underground reserve, the desert nation hopes to guarantee its people a sufficient supply of water for many years to come.